Hello and welcome back to the Papi English podcast. This is the podcast that helps you learn English. My name is Sam and I am your English teacher. And well, last week we didn't have a podcast. We had a week off from the podcast because actually I was a bit snowed under with work. Now, what does it mean to be snowed under with something? Well, if you're snowed under with something, it means you have so much to do that you cannot do something else. So I was snowed under with work, so I couldn't make the podcast, unfortunately. But now we are back with podcast 12. It's the 12th episode of the Papi English podcast already. And we're going to be having a podcast every Thursday from now on. So hopefully I don't get snowed under with things to do again. But yes, podcast 12. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about modals of lost opportunity. Yes, modals of lost opportunity. It sounds pretty cool. And these modals of lost opportunity are could have, should have, and would have. Maybe you've heard of them before. Should have, could have, and would have. And these modals kind of work like grammatical time machines. Pretty cool, no? Grammatical time machines. They allow us to travel back in time and imagine a different world, which is a pretty cool thing to do in English. So it's a good thing to learn and a good thing to master. So basically, these modal verbs, you must remember to use the past participle. So the structure is should, could, and would are the modal verbs. Then we have have, which you must use to talk about the past. Have is the auxiliary verb. Should have, could have, would have. And then you must use the past participle, which is the third form of the verb. So do, did, done. You need to use done. Go, went, gone. You need to use gone. Okay, be, was or were. Been, okay? Or it could be a regular verb. So study, studied. Study, studied. The third form, studied. Work, worked. Okay? I should have worked more. I could have studied more. Okay? I would have been happy if I had studied more. We're also going to get on the third conditional a little bit later. So this is important to remember, but it's also good to remember that there are different pronunciations of this should have, could have, would have. Now, if we are speaking English or texting or using informal English when we're writing, we don't say should have, we say should have. Should have. So we're kind of taking away the H and the A, and we're just pronouncing the of. Should have. If you see it written, you will see should apostrophe VE. So it's become should have, could have, would have. Okay? And also, if you're speaking kind of informal English, it's kind of like a slang English, kind of street English, you'll hear people say shoulda, coulda, woulda. So it becomes from should have to should have to shoulda. Could have to could have to coulda. Would have to would have to woulda. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. I should have studied more. I could have worked yesterday. I would have been happy if I'd done that, for example. Okay, so remember that as well. If you hear that, remember that it's this structure that we're using, which are these grammatical time machines that allow us to travel back in time, and they kind of allow us to express how we feel in the present about something that happened in the past. It's different to the past simple, because the past simple tells us simply what happened in the past. But these modal verbs tell us what should have happened, what could have happened, what would have happened. For example, I didn't study. Okay, this is the past simple. I didn't study. But I could have studied. It's possible. I could have studied. Didn't happen, but I could have studied. I was late for work, but I shouldn't have been late for work. So also remember we can use it in the negative. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have. Okay? I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have. I couldn't have. I couldn't have. I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have. Okay, so we can use it. It's different to the past simple because it's hypothetical. We're changing the past and looking at a different world. Now, first of all, let's start off with should. No, not should. Let's start off with could. Could means that something was possible in the past, but it didn't happen. For example, I'm going to give you a little example. I finished university and I had a lot of options. Like I was young, I had to choose a kind of career or what I was going to do with my life. What I decided to do was to move to Spain and become an English teacher. But I could have done many different things. I could have gone to South America. I could have studied to be a Spanish teacher. Why not? Hablo un poco de español. No, I speak a little Spanish, but maybe not a Spanish teacher. I could have stayed in England. It's possible. It didn't happen, but it is possible. I could have got a job in London, maybe. Maybe I could have got a job in London. So all of these things didn't happen in the past, but they were possible in the past. So I'm using could have to express what was possible in the past but didn't happen. Should have is similar. It means that something did not happen in the past, but we kind of wish it had happened. Okay, so you might look in your past and go, I wish I had done this. For example, when I was a teenager, let's say 14 or 15 years old, I was quite lazy. I think it's quite normal for teenagers to be lazy. So I don't beat myself up about it. Okay, I don't make myself feel bad about it, that means. So yeah, I was quite lazy when I was a teenager. And I wish I had done some things differently. Okay, I should have studied more. Okay, because my grades were okay, but they could have been better. It was possible that they were better. They could have been better. I should have studied more. I should have listened to my parents. Okay, they might be listening to this podcast. I should have listened to my parents. They'll enjoy me saying that. I should have listened to my parents. They gave some very good advice. Okay, I didn't always listen because I was a teenager and that's what teenagers do. But I should have listened to them. I wish I had listened to them. I should have studied more. I should have listened to my parents. I think that's about it. I don't know about you. Do you wish you had done things different? Maybe write some example sentences. Practice it yourself. What should you have done differently in your life? Now, moving on to would. Would is a little bit different. It's a bit more complicated. Actually, there are two different ways we can use would. We can use would to show that we wanted to do something, but we couldn't do it. Okay, to say that we wanted to do something, but we couldn't do it. I think this is a great way to show this is with the whole situation with coronavirus, because a lot of us had rules during the coronavirus and they stopped us doing things we wanted to do. For example, I wanted to go to the cinema. Okay, I wanted to go to the cinema. So I can say I would have gone to the cinema, but I couldn't because the cinemas were closed. I would have gone to the cinema, but they were closed. I would have gone on holiday in Croatia, but I couldn't travel to Croatia because the border was closed. Okay, I would have gone, but I couldn't. I would have travelled with work, but it wasn't possible. I would have travelled, but it was difficult because of coronavirus. Okay, so this is one way that we can use would. And we can also use would as the result clause of the third conditional, which we often use to express regret, the third conditional. So it's the result. Remember, in the first clause, we used the past perfect. So we use if past perfect. For example, if I had studied more, I would have got better grades. Okay, the result of the third conditional, I would have got better grades. Hypothetically, we're looking back in the past and saying, if I did this, this would have happened. Now I'm going to tell you a little story where I have some regrets. When I was at university, I had a weekend job at a bar and something bad happened. I'm going to tell you the story and then we're going to use the grammar to explain my regret in the past. I went out with my friends and I got a little bit tipsy. If you say I got a little bit tipsy, it means I got a little bit drunk. Okay, so I went out with my friends and I got a little bit tipsy and I got home late. The next morning I woke up late and I was late for work. My boss was very angry and then I was very stressed and I made a lot of mistakes at work. My boss then sacked me. Sacked is another way of saying fired me. I lost my job. My boss sacked me. Okay, and then I had no job. So now we're going to use the third conditional, using would have, to travel back in time and look at a hypothetical world where things would have been different. Remember to use, in the first clause, to use past perfect. So if I hadn't gone out with my friends, I wouldn't have got a little bit tipsy. I wouldn't have got a little bit tipsy. If I hadn't got a little bit tipsy, I wouldn't have got home late. If I hadn't got home late, I wouldn't have woken up late. If I hadn't woken up late, I wouldn't have arrived at work late. If I hadn't arrived at work late, my boss wouldn't have shouted at me. If my boss hadn't shouted at me, I wouldn't have got stressed. If I hadn't got stressed, I wouldn't have made lots of mistakes at work. If I hadn't made lots of mistakes at work, my boss wouldn't have fired me. If my boss hadn't fired me, I would still have a job. Okay, so this is kind of third conditional to talk about regrets, and we use would have here as well. Would have is a grammatical time machine, something really useful to be able to use in English to express yourself, and it's really cool. I think it's really cool. It's a really cool thing to be able to use. So let's just have a little collective brain thing where we think of everything together. So we have could, which means that something was possible in the past but it didn't happen. Okay, I could have gone to South America. I could have lived in South America, but I didn't. It was possible. We use should to say that something didn't happen, but we wish it had happened. So for example, I wish I had listened to my parents. I should have listened to my parents. I should have studied more. We can use would to show that we wanted to do something in the past, but we couldn't. During coronavirus, I would have gone to the cinema, but they were closed. We can also use would as part of the third conditional to talk about our regrets. Okay? If I hadn't got a little bit tipsy, a little bit drunk, I wouldn't have lost my job. Okay? I regret it so much. So that's everything. Remember the pronunciation. I should have, shoulda. Would have, would've, woulda. Okay, you can also use it when you're speaking English and practice pronouncing it kind of the slang way. I should have done that, because that's how you speak when you're speaking quickly. It's very common. It's a normal thing to do. Also, try writing a few example sentences using could have, would have, should have to help you remember it. And why not watch the podcast again if you forget anything and make notes of the important points. So that's everything, guys. Let me know in the comments your example sentences as well. Thank you for listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching the Papi English podcast. Papi English is practice and perfection in English. That's what we're doing in here. We're practicing, we're making our English better. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast.